Before his death, Paul Newman revealed which stars of Hollywood's golden age were secretly gay. The era sparkled with iconic names whose screen presence captivated millions. But their private realities stayed buried beneath studio-crafted illusions. Newman, one of the most respected actors of his generation, carried with him stories that would reshape our understanding of old Hollywood. What he shared in his final days painted an entirely different picture of the industry's brightest figures and exposed the extreme measures studios took to protect their most valuable stars. The things he knew about Rock Hudson, James Dean, and several other legends would make anyone question what they thought they knew about the so-called glamorous age. But before those revelations, it's essential to understand the world these stars lived in, a world where telling the truth about yourself could destroy your career within hours, and where the studio system would go to shocking lengths to bury anything it considered dangerous. In 1947, World War II had ended, America was thriving, and Hollywood was producing films at a speed never seen before. But behind the glitter of Tinseltown lay a darker truth. The major studios controlled nearly every detail of an actor's existence. They dictated where you appeared, who you've seen with, and even who you married. For actors whose sexuality didn't match the public image, studios demanded. This meant living double lives built on strategic lies. Studio bosses like Louis B. Mayer at MGM and Jack Warner at Warner Brothers created a climate of fear enforced by fixers, people hired solely to keep scandals buried. The most notorious fixer was Eddie Mannix at MGM, who arranged fake marriages, paid off anyone threatening exposure, and ensured that nothing behind closed doors ever reached the public. Paul Newman entered Hollywood in the 1950s as the old system was slowly weakening, but its control over personal lives was still immense. As a rising star, with striking blue eyes and undeniable charm, he became aware of the industry's deepest secrets. Newman lived long enough to see the truth about some of his peers slowly emerge, and near the end of his life, he reportedly reflected on how much pain those secrets caused to people forced to keep them. The tragedy, he is said to have told a close friend in 2008, wasn't only that these men had to hide who they were. The real tragedy was that everyone knew and pretended not to. Years of collective silence left lasting scars. What Newman revealed about 6 beloved male stars finally confirmed what insiders whispered for decades. These weren't rumors. These were the lived realities of men forced to deny themselves to protect their careers and, sometimes, their safety. Being exposed as gay didn't just mean scandal. It could mean arrest, jail, and complete professional ruin. The studio's solution was to build flawless heterosexual identities for these actors, staged relationships, arranged marriages, hired escorts for public events, and a press eager to cooperate. The facade was so convincing that fans never suspected the truth, and the first star, whose carefully constructed illusion Newman discussed, was a man long considered the ultimate symbol of American masculinity. Rock Hudson's death from AIDS. Complications in 1985 stunned the nation. Millions couldn't believe that Hollywood's towering romantic hero had been secretly gay. But as Newman privately revealed late in life, Hudson's sexuality was no secret within the industry. Rock suffered more than most, Newman reportedly said. Everyone inside Hollywood knew, but Universal couldn't risk losing their biggest box office star. Hudson's agent, Henry Wilson, specialized in managing handsome young actors while strictly controlling their personal lives. He arranged Hudson's 1955 marriage to his secretary, Phyllis Gates, a short-lived union meant to silence rumors. What made Hudson's life especially painful was how fully the public accepted the fiction. Women adored him on screen, never imagining he lived a completely separate life in private. Newman described seeing Hudson struggle at parties, forced to appear with women chosen by the studio. Everyone in the room knew it was an act. Maintaining this facade pushed Hudson to seek moments of freedom in hidden places, though the risk was immense. After he fell ill in 1984, he tried to hide his diagnosis, but suspicions grew after his appearance on Dynasty. When he died in 1985, America was forced to face a truth Hollywood had buried for decades. His death, Newman reportedly said, made decades of lying feel cruelly pointless. Anthony Perkins, best known as Norman Bates in Psycho, faced a different but equally painful struggle. Even as he portrayed complex, troubled characters on screen, he was wrestling privately with deep fear and anxiety about his sexuality. Newman told friends that Perkins lived in constant dread of exposure. After Psycho, the public attention became suffocating. The studios handled his image by presenting him as an introverted, sensitive artist who focused on his craft for relationships. In reality, Perkins reportedly had relationships with male actors and dancers, hidden completely from public view. At private gatherings, he could relax and be himself. But once he stepped back into the public eye, the mask returned. The pressure drove Perkins into conversion therapy, a practice now condemned which only deepened his inner conflict. He married photographer Barry Berenson in 1973 and had 2 sons. But those close to him believed his internal struggle never fully eased. Perkins died of AIDS in 1992, keeping his diagnosis secret almost until the end. Determined to avoid the spectacle that followed Hudson's illness, James Dean, whose life burned fast and bright, presented yet another story. His 3 major films made him immortal, but his personal truth remained complex. Newman, who had worked with Dean early in their careers, reportedly said Dean was the least willing to follow Hollywood's rules. Jimmy didn't care about the boundaries. Newman recalled, he pushed against every one of them, including those about who he loved. Dean had relationships with women, including Pierre and Lee, but accounts from friends and biographers describe significant relationships with men as well. Studios didn't know how to contain him, so they built up the rebel persona and hoped audiences wouldn't look deeper. Newman believed Dean would never have kept the facade for decades. Something would have eventually cracked. Dean's death in 1955 froze him as a cultural icon, leaving his complexities largely erased from the simplified legend the studios preferred. Montgomery Clift brought unprecedented vulnerability to male roles, but privately he struggled with inner turmoil that only grew with time. Newman admired Clift deeply and spoke of him with sadness. Monty couldn't separate his true self from his characters or his pain from his art. Hiding who he was became impossible for someone so emotionally exposed. After a devastating car accident in 1956 that changed his appearance and intensified his personal battles, Clift turned increasingly to alcohol and medications. Within Hollywood circles, his relationships with men were known, and Elizabeth Taylor became one of the few people who offered him genuine acceptance. As his struggles worsened, studios distanced themselves not only because of reliability issues but because Clift no longer fit the carefully controlled public model. He died in 1966 at 45, and Newman later said it felt almost inevitable to those close to him. Tab Hunter, the blonde all-American heartthrob of the 1950s, lived a life that was both easier and harder than his peers. His idealized image made him extremely valuable to Warner Brothers, and Jack Warner personally protected him. When a magazine threatened to expose his presence at what they called a pajama party, Warner reportedly traded information about another actor to keep Hunter's name out of it. Hunter later confirmed in his autobiography that many of his public dates with actresses like Natalie Wood were studio-arranged performances. Behind the scenes, he had relationships with men, including Anthony Perkins, and later partnered with producer Alan Glazer. When Hunter left Warner Bros. In pursuit of more serious roles, his career suffered without studio protection. Still, unlike many, he lived long enough to reclaim his story, passing away in 2018 at 86. Among the stories Newman discussed, perhaps none was as heartbreaking as that of Sal Mineo. Mineo earned fame in Rebel Without a Cause and Exodus, his talent marking him as one of Hollywood's brightest young actors. Newman, who worked with him, respected his integrity. Sal wasn't willing to play the Hollywood game as obediently as others, and it cost him roles. As he matured, he refused to keep hiding, living more openly in theater circles even though it limited his film opportunities. Mineo directed groundbreaking productions dealing with same-sex themes and was pushing boundaries far ahead of his time. Tragically, he was murdered in 1976 at age 37, ending a career that might have flourished in a more accepting era.